Hi, everyone. Today we're going over chapter 3, which is all about human energy, the energy we need and that we use to do all of our daily living, whether it's just sleeping, resting, watching TV, or all the way up to intensely exercising. What is energy? When we use the word energy, we're just talking about the capacity to do work. Our body is always working, whether we're conscious of it or not. It's always pumping our heart. It's always pumping our blood. It's always converting oxygen to carbon dioxide, and all of that uses energy. It has to do work. Work is only one form of energy. This is often called mechanical or kinetic energy. And in the human body, we use all different forms. Chemical, electrical, heat, and mechanical energy are all important. There are other types of energy that we use in our life, but these are the main types that our actual body uses. So these are just some examples. The sun is obviously puts out solar energy. Plants store chemical energy in their bonds, carbohydrates, fats, protein. Animals do as well, and so do we. When we eat food, we are literally eating the chemicals we get from our food. Food is made of chemicals. All food is made of chemicals. And the pictures on the right, those are the chemical formulas. The top one is protein, the bottom one is starch. And it's in those chemical bonds that energy is stored. And when we eat our food, our body breaks those bonds. Every time those bonds are broken, we get energy from that. What terms are used to quantify work and power during exercise? So work equals force times distance. Power equals work divided by time. Measurements. We use a lot of different measurements. The English measurements, foot, inches, pound, even horsepower we use as a term for energy. Metric and international, the scientific international, adopted by most of the world and used in today's scientific journals. Liters, grams, meters, seconds, newtons, joules, watts, those are way more common. How do we measure physical activity and energy expenditure? Whenever we see the letters EE, it's always talking about energy expenditure. We're going to use a lot of acronyms this chapter, and it's good to maybe have a piece of paper in front of you, write down the acronym. So when you read a sentence with that acronym, you can go back and realize, oh, that's the acronym. That's what that means. So doctors, nutritionists, they always do a physical activity questionnaire. Are you physical? How much physical activity do you do during the week? These things, heart rate monitoring, ergometers and exercise equipment, calorimetry can measure calories either directly or indirectly. The doubly labeled water technique is actually fairly important. We'll go through that. We measure physical activity levels, PAL, metabolic equivalents, METs, motion sensors, combination devices, smartphone applications, or apps for physical activity. We can measure physical activity and energy expenditure any and all of these ways. So physical activity and energy expenditure are actually different things. Physical activity involves bodily movement, which increases energy expenditure above resting levels. There are various devices, such as smartphone applications, that measure movement, which can predict energy expenditure. And of course, the more vigorous the activity, the more energy we are going to expend. Yeah. Calorimetry measures heat production in the body, which is proportional to energy expenditure. So direct calorimetry measures heat produced by the body directly. So just with a thermometer, somebody's exercising, their temperature obviously gets raised. Indirect calorimetry estimates the energy expenditure by measuring oxygen consumption and carbon dioxide production. So if you see somebody running and they have this mask on, they're in a lab, they're measuring how much oxygen are they using, how much carbon dioxide are they producing. And then the doubly labeled water technique is actually the gold standard. Scientists use this quite a bit. This measures the total daily energy expenditure in individuals in a free living environment. So subjects will drink water labeled with stable isotopes of both hydrogen and oxygen. That hydrogen is only lost through water, sweat, urine, breath, while oxygen is lost through both water and carbon dioxide production. By measuring how quickly each isotope leaves the body via the urine, saliva, blood samples over several days, scientists can determine the carbon dioxide production. Since carbon dioxide production reflects energy use, this method allows researchers to accurately calculate a person's total energy expenditure in a natural real-world setting. The most common unit of energy that we use is the calorie. The most common way to express energy in most of the world is the kilojoule. So 1 gram of calories will increase the temperature of 1 gram of water 1 degree Celsius. That is the definition of just what a calorie is. 1,000 calories equals 1 kilocalorie. A kilocalorie, abbreviated as kcal, is the measure of energy that is used in this text, as well as all of your food labels. When it says calorie and there's 280 calories, that actually means kilocalories, but we shorten it to calorie for some reason. So there are calories in almost everything you eat and drink. Not everything, of course, but almost. There's 4 calories per gram of carbohydrate. So every time you eat a gram of carbohydrate, you are consuming 4.3 calories. There's 9.45 calories in a gram of fat. So every time you consume a gram of fat, it is double the calories than that of carbohydrates. Proteins, 5.65 calories per gram of protein, and alcohol is 7 grams of kilocalories per gram of alcohol is consumed every time you drink. So just for an example, 8 ounces of juice, 8 ounces of orange juice will provide enough chemical energy, enough calories for the average man to produce enough mechanical energy. So we convert that energy to our muscles and everything else to run about a mile. How is energy stored in the body? Energy in the body is available for immediate use in the form of adenosine triphosphate. That's a term you should have learned about in previous courses. The GIF on the right is going through ATP, breaks off one of the P's, one of the little phosphates. That's where the energy comes from. Like I said in that one of those first slides, that bond gets broken, we get that energy. A complex molecule constructed with high energy bonds, which when split by enzyme action can release energy rapidly for a number of body processes. Another related high energy phosphate compound is phosphocreatine, abbreviated PCR. It's also found in the tissues in small amounts. It cannot be used as an immediate source of energy, but can rapidly replenish our ATP so we can use more of that. So energy source, ATP is found in the tissues. Total body kilocalories is 1, kilojoules is 4.2, can cover a distance of 17.5 yards. PCR is also found in the tissues. Carbohydrate is found in various places. Fats are found in various places, stored in various places in our bodies. And then proteins is mainly found in the muscles. Human energy system. So like we said, that's where the energy is stored. How do we get it out of there? So the ATP PCR system, also known as the phosphagen system, ATP is stored in the muscles. It rapidly releases energy when an electrical impulse arrives into the muscle and makes it contract. The lactic acid system or glycolytic system, because it depends on glycolysis, which is the first step of cellular respiration. Cellular respiration has 3 steps. Glycolysis is that first one. Lactic acid system does not use oxygen. It's called an anaerobic system because no oxygen is used. It cannot be used directly as a source of energy for muscular contraction, but it can help replace ATP rapidly when necessary. And then the system that does use oxygen, the oxidative or aerobic system. It produces ATP in rather large quantities from other energy sources in the body: muscle glycogen, liver glycogen, blood glucose, muscle triglycerides, blood FFA for fatty acids, and triglycerides, adipose cell triglycerides, and body protein. So I'm going to show a video that explains a little more about that better than I could.
Energy is needed to produce physical movement, maintain body temperature, and keep up with all the metabolic activities in the body. In our bodies, all physical movement relies on the compound adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. ATP is stored in the muscles, so it is immediately available to produce movement. However, storage of ATP in the muscles is limited. So any movement that lasts longer than a few seconds requires more ATP to be produced. Our bodies have three systems that can produce ATP: the ATP PCR system, the glycolytic system, or lactic acid system, and the oxidative system. The first two systems are anaerobic systems, meaning oxygen is not required to produce ATP. The oxidative system is aerobic because oxygen is needed for ATP production. The ATP PCR system is based on movements lasting about 5 to 15 seconds, such as strength power movements like a golf swing, jumps, throwing, or racket serves. These type of quick burst movements can be done with ATP that is stored in the muscles. During short sustained power movements or any quick bursts, such as a short sprint, ATP will provide the energy alone for the first few seconds, with a compound called creatine phosphate, or PCR, offering the ATP for another few seconds. Like ATP, the amount of PCR is limited, so this system can provide energy for movements up to about 15 seconds in total. This energy system produces ATP very quickly, but not over a long duration. Next, energy demands shift to the glycolytic system. This system relies on the rapid breakdown of carbohydrates. Glucose, which is one of the most basic forms of carbohydrates, is constantly circulating in the bloodstream. And glycogen is a stored form of glucose in the muscles and liver. This blood glucose, or glycogen, is broken down to create ATP through a process called glycolysis. During this energy supply process, a substance called lactate is formed and hydrogen ions are released. It's believed that the accumulation of these hydrogen ions in the muscle causes the muscle to become more acidic, contributing to fatigue and a burning sensation. Exercises that are performed at maximum rates for between 1 to 2 minutes, such as a 200-yard dash, depend heavily on the lactic acid system for ATP energy. This energy system produces ATP very quickly, but again, not over a long duration. The oxidative system involves the use of oxygen. Through two complex metabolic processes, the Krebs cycle or citric acid cycle, and the electron transport chain, ATP is produced. This energy system, with all of its processes, can't produce ATP nearly as quickly as the first two systems. However, this system can produce ATP for a much longer duration. This system can use carbs, fats, or if necessary, even protein. However, fats and proteins have to be broken down, so when the system uses them, the process becomes longer. This system is used for longer duration activities, such as a bike ride or long run. The chart on the screen shows an estimate of the percentage of energy used from each system, along with time plotted at the top. As you can see, the ATP PCR system dominates at the beginning. Then glycolysis becomes the dominant energy provider, and then energy really relies on the oxidative system. Here are two other charts. The one on the left shows an estimated rate of ATP production per second for each system. It also shows the rate for carbs and fats for the oxidative system. You can see how much more rapidly the ATP, PCR, and glycolysis systems are at ATP production. On the left is a chart showing the aerobic ATP production for trained and untrained people, showing the benefits of well-trained persons as they don't run out of energy easily. Each of these systems can be trained to be more productive. By changing your workout routines, doing explosive moves like box jumps, you can improve system 1. By doing circuit routines, going from one exercise to the next, with little to no rest in between and using lighter weights, you can train system 2. And by doing a 20 to 30 minute cardio session of low to moderate intensity, like walking, jogging, or biking, you can improve system 3. It's a good practice to train all three systems by altering your workout routine. The body is amazing, and it adapts very quickly. Changing up routines also provides mental stimulation, which helps overall health and can help people stay motivated to work out regularly. Remember this, folks. Treat your body as differently as possible, as often as possible.
That was the overview of the three systems of energy.
Energy is needed to produce physical movement, maintain body temperature, and keep up with all the...
That was the beginning. Okay, so nutrients is the next section. What nutrients are necessary for operation of the human systems? All of them. Water contributes to hydrolysis. Vitamins such as B vitamins, coenzymes are involved in many energy processes. Minerals are essential for energy processes. Iron is part of hemoglobin, which transports oxygen all around our bodies. In addition, there are non-nutrients such as creatine and caffeine that may affect exercise metabolism. Metabolism represents the sum total of all physical and chemical changes that take place within the body. It can be broken down into anabolism, which all the processes that build up our bodies, constructive metabolism, or catabolism is our tearing down process. Sometimes things in our bodies need to be broken down. So disintegration of body compounds. Metabolism is life. The total daily energy expenditure, the TDEE. Like I said, we're using a lot of acronyms this chapter. This is energy needed for basal or just our basic metabolism. Energy for processing of food intake, energy for physical activity, total daily energy expenditure. Which factors account for the amount of energy expended at rest, during rest? Our basal metabolic rate is the energy needed to stay alive when we are awake, but not really anything beyond that. Only sleeping metabolic rate is lower. The basal energy expenditure is the basal metabolism over a whole 24-hour period. Our resting metabolic rate is our BMR plus small amounts of associated with eating and previous muscular activity. It's about 10% higher than our BER. And our resting energy expenditure, or our REE, that we're going to go over a lot, is our resting metabolism over a 24-hour period. What effect does a meal have on metabolic rate? Metabolic rate is always elevated after a meal. Our body has to work just a little bit harder to be able to digest all of our food, break it down for our energy sources. It's previously known as specific dynamic action of food, but it's now referred to as the dietary induced thermogenesis or thermic effect of food. Energy necessary to absorb, transport, store, and metabolize the food that we consume. TEF is expressed as the percentage of meal energy content. So TEF from a mixed meal of carbohydrate, fat, and protein is about 5 to 10%. What factors affect my resting energy expenditure? Age, of course. Infants have an extremely high REE, but it declines with age. Gender, sex. REE for women is about 10 to 15% lower than men. Men metabolize things faster than women. We know that. Body size and surface area. Genetically leaner individuals have a higher REE than stockier individuals because they have greater surface area to weight ratio and lose more body heat through radiation. And then body composition. People with a naturally greater muscle mass have a higher REE. Muscle burns things faster than fat does. Dieting. How does that affect our REE? Body composition may be changed to alter our REE. Losing body weight, both fat and muscle, lowers it. Very low kilocalorie diets may decrease the REE. May be caused by lower levels of thyroid hormones. Maintaining normal body weight while reducing body fat and increasing muscle mass will raise the REE. And the decline in REE that occurs with aging may be associated with the loss of muscle mass and accumulation of body fat. Like I just said, muscle metabolizes things faster than fat does. Environmental factors that affect the REE. Caffeine is a stimulant. 2 to 3 cups of regular coffee increases the REE by 10 to 12%. Stimulant makes our heart beat faster. That's why it raises it. Hot and spicy foods, such as peppers containing capsaicin, exert a modest stimulant effect. Nicotine from cigarette smoke is also a stimulant. It will increase the REE. Climatic conditions may raise the REE. Exposure to cold weather stimulates the secretion of several hormones and muscular shivering. Exposure to warm or hot weather increases energy expenditure through greater cardiovascular demands and the sweating response. An increased ventilation with altitude exposure will increase the REE. When you go up in altitude, I was just in Denver, you have to breathe actually a little bit harder to get as much oxygen as you would otherwise. What energy sources are used during rest? He went over it a little bit In the video, the oxygen energy system prevails during rest, about 60% of energy from fats. We get about 40% of our energy from carbohydrate when we're at rest. We do get a small amount of energy from protein. The diet may affect the energy source during rest. Eating a diet rich in carbohydrates or fat will increase energy derived from carbohydrate and fat, depending on what you're eating. When carbohydrate levels are low, such as after an overnight fast, the percentage of the REE will be derived from fat increases. Human energy metabolism during exercise. Exercise will stress most body systems, but we tend to focus on the nervous system and the muscular system. So the nervous system is needed to activate muscle contraction, and then the muscle cell itself is where the energetics of exercise occur. So how do my muscles influence the amount of energy I can produce during exercise? Skeletal muscles create movement of the skeletal system when they are stimulated and contract. There are three main types of muscle fibers, and I'm going to show this video. I like this guy because he talks about it in a way that's supposed to help you memorize the information better.
Today, we're going over muscle fibers and their attributes, and there is potentially a lot to know here, but we're going to break it down for you and make it real easy, so let's get into it. All right, so to start off with, you probably heard that we have slow twitch and fast twitch muscle fibers. In medical terms, slow twitch fibers are named type 1, while fast twitch fibers are named type 2. Type 2 fibers are then subdivided again to type 2A and type 2X. You may see type 2X fibers labeled as type 2B. However, this is kind of an old way of doing things. Recent research shows that only animals have type 2B fibers. So to be the most accurate, really, we should be calling them type 2X. Now, the reason these fibers have different names and classifications is because they each have different attributes and are specialized for different activities. You can remember the attributes of type 1 fibers by using the acronym ONE. O-N-E. The O here stands for oxidative because these fibers use oxygen to create ADP, which is a slow process. So type 1 fibers are sometimes referred to as slow oxidative. The N in one helps you remember that it has numerous mitochondria, numerous capillaries, and numerous myoglobin, which is why it appears red. And this makes sense because it uses oxygen to create energy, so it needs a big network of blood and oxygen circulating through it, which explains the red color. The E in one stands for endurance because this is the main feature of type 1 fibers. They are used for slow endurance activities like walking. Now that we know what type 1 fibers are all about, we can jump over to type 2X.
Just a side note, this is a great, if you're taking notes, this is a great chart to take notes.
Remember, this is that they're basically the exact opposite of type 1 fibers. Type 2X are the strongest and fastest of the three fibers, and you can remember this by thinking of the X in 2X as standing for explosive. So instead of using oxygen, these fibers are anaerobic, meaning they use readily available ATP that's just floating around. They're not going through the long process of using oxygen to create ADP, so they don't need a lot of mitochondria, capillaries, or blood. This is why they appear white. And finally, like we covered, this is not a fiber for endurance. This is a short-term power fiber used for explosive activities like sprinting or low-rep powerlifting. All right, we got type 1 and type 2X covered. Let's jump over to type 2A. The easiest way to remember the type 2A fibers is just to think of the A in 2A as standing for average. These fibers are basically the average of the other two. Since it's a type 2, it is considered a fast twitch fiber, but it can also do glycolytic and oxidative energy production. As for what's inside, it has an average amount of mitochondria, an average amount of capillaries, and an average amount of myoglobin. And as for down here, again, it has an average amount of fatigue resistance and average endurance. It's basically the jack of all trades, but the master of none. Now that covers the three fibers, but there's one more way you can think about all this stuff that no one really ever talks about. If you've ever eaten chicken, you probably know a lot more about these fibers than you even realize. Dark meat chicken, the legs, are basically just type 1 fibers. As we remember, type 1 fibers are the endurance fibers, and they're filled with numerous capillaries and myoglobin. Walking is a chicken's primary mode of transportation, so they need these endurance fibers to keep them moving. And the reason it's dark meat is because it's filled with all this stuff like the capillaries and myoglobin needed to perform oxidative respiration. Chickens can, of course, fly a little bit, but it's kind of this explosive short-term activity. That's why breast meat is white, because it's mostly these fast twitch fibers. They don't need a ton of blood and oxygen because flying is a short-term explosive activity for these birds. Now, next time you're at KFC, I wouldn't advise you trying to order a 3-piece type 1 fiber plate or anything like that. But in 10 years, if you're having trouble remembering this entire chart, you can probably work out the details just by thinking about lunch. All right, that covers.
You're going to think about that next time you have chicken.
Mus-
So what effect does muscular exercise have on the metabolic rate? All physical activity increases the metabolic activity above the REE, above the resting energy expenditure. Activities that raise energy output above the REE but do not count as exercise are very light activities such as sitting, typing, playing cards. Planned exercise activities will increase the metabolism even more, so represented by the exercise metabolic rate or the thermic effect of exercise. Moderate to strenuous physical activity such as brisk walking, climbing stairs, cycling, dancing, running, or anything more strenuous than that. Most important factor affecting the metabolic rate is the intensity or speed of the exercise. So, resting metabolic rate, if the resting metabolic rate is one caloric expenditure per minute, sitting and writing, you're doing a little bit extra, that's 2. Running at 5 miles per hour is almost 10 times, so 9 times that will expend 9.4 calories per minute. And then the list goes on. Converting. So we have all of these units. We need to be able to convert between them. So energy costs have been reported as kilocalories, like we've been talking about, kilojoules, oxygen uptake, and METs, which are multiples of the RMR, the resting metabolic rate. So if we use 0.25 liters of oxygen per minute, that goes up every time we do a little bit more exercise. And we can report that, like we just said, liters, calories, joules, METs. So energy conversion, 1 kilocalorie equals approximately 4 joules. So 4.184 joules. So if you can either multiply by that or divide by that, depending on if you're going from calories to joules or joules to calories. 1 liter of oxygen burns about 5 calories, or to convert 1 liter of oxygen takes about 5 calories of energy. So if the exercise cost is 3 liters of oxygen, this is the example in the middle, to get the kilocalorie cost, we just multiply the liters of oxygen by the kcals per liter. So 3, if we need, or if we've used 3 liters of oxygen times 5 kilocalories equals 15 kilocalories per minute. And then the MET, there's a whole formula to calculate the MET. 3.5 milliliters of oxygen divided by the kilograms of body weight per minute. And we are using the amount of oxygen consumed during rest for that. On the right, there's a little chart, and I've linked in the article that chart comes from. It explains the MET a little better. But calories per minute equals the MET of the value of the activity times 3.5 times the body weight in kilograms, and then divided by 200 because they're exercising for 200 minutes. But the METs are different depending on how heavy, how intense you are exercising. How can I tell what my metabolic rate is during exercise? The major technique for evaluating the metabolic rate is to measure oxygen consumption during exercise. They also measure the VO2 max, so the maximum oxygen you are consuming and converting. The maximal heart rate and the anaerobic threshold may help in planning optimal training programs. There is a linear relationship that exists between exercise intensity and oxygen uptake. That should be common sense. The more intense you exercise, the harder you have to breathe. So the more oxygen you have to take in, the heart rate goes up, your respiration goes up. How can I determine the energy cost of my exercise routine? So that's the MET system. 1 kilocalorie per kilogram per hour. So the MET value includes the REE. The MET values are only for the time you are actually doing the activity, not at rest. The MET values are not precise and will vary based on your skill level, your training status, and the environment. Not all body weights or MET levels are listed. Approximate by going to the closest value listed. the best types of activities to increase energy expenditure and activities involving large muscle groups and that perform continually. Intensity and duration are two key determinants of total energy expenditure. So walking, running, swimming, cycling, group exercise, home aerobic exercise equipment, resistance training, sports activity, or passive and occupational energy expenditure. If you have a job where you do some of these things, you are raising your energy expenditure. Does exercise affect my REE? Yes. There are metabolic after effects of exercise. Exercise raises the metabolic rate during exercise, but also keeps the REE elevated during recovery. There's an increase in body temperature and amounts of circulating hormones, such as adrenaline, will continue to influence some cellular activity. You know, if you run or you do exercise, it takes a few minutes to kind of settle down. It's the same for your internal body cells as well. Circulation and respiration will remain elevated for a limited time. Excess post-exercise oxygen consumption, or EPOC, is the amount of oxygen in excess of the pre-exercise REE measured during recovery after the exercise task. The RMR remains elevated after intense exercise, such as a HIIT workout, high-intensity interval training. Extra caloric expenditure above resting metabolism may be modest, but may add up over time. Does exercise affect the thermic effect of food? Research findings are actually ambiguous on this. There haven't been enough studies, and the studies that they have done have been pretty limited. So any effect is believed to be minor at this point. How much energy should I consume daily? The estimated energy requirement is the intake that is predicted to maintain energy balance in a healthy adult of defined age, gender, weight, height, and level of physical activity consistent with good health. The total daily energy expenditure is the sum of your basal energy expenditure, your thermic effect of food, the small as it is, and the most is the basal energy expenditure, sorry, and then the thermic effect of exercise. Physical activity level, or PAL, is the TDEE divided by the BEE over a 24-hour period. And the higher the ratio, the greater the amount of daily physical activity it represents. And there are whole mathematical formulas to determine the estimated energy requirements, and they are different for males and females. Age in years, weight, always talking about weight in kilograms when it comes to scientific things. Height, meters, always meters, centimeters, and then PA is based on that physical activity level from the previous slide. So, for example, an estimated energy requirement for two 20-year-old females, one that lives a sedentary lifestyle, her PA number would be about 1. Her estimated energy rate would calculate out to about 1,794 kilocalories per day to just keep up her regular internal activities. Now, if somebody who has a very active lifestyle, they need some more calories because their PA, their physical activity level, goes up. So they need more calories to be able to maintain their inner levels. Note that all procedures used to determine estimate energy expenditure are estimates and may vary. You always want to compare findings with your personal wearable gadget or smartphone app that estimates your personal daily energy expenditure. Which energy systems are used during exercise? Intensity is the most important factor determining which energy system is used. Most exercise tasks use a blend of the 3 major human energy systems, but use one system will predominate depending on exercise intensity. He showed that chart where the PCR dominated for the first 10 seconds or so, and then the glycolytic for the next 60 seconds or so, and then the oxidative for the long term. So this is another little bit more complicated chart than the one I told you to copy from the video, but you can always add this into your chart for the notes. Energy sources during exercise. During mild to moderate exercise, it's a little bit different when we are using less than 50% of our oxygen intake. Blood glucose is our carbohydrate source. The body uses some glucose from the bloodstream to supply energy, but demand is relatively low if we're not breathing really heavy. Free fatty acids from the blood is our fat source. The body primarily relies on fats for energy at this low intensity. FFA is released from adipose or fat tissue or the main fuel source since oxygen is readily available to support fat metabolism. During higher intensity exercise, when we are breathing a little harder and using more than 50% of our oxygen intake, our carbohydrate source is muscle glycogen. The body shifts to using more carbohydrates, especially glycogen stored in the muscles, because it is a faster and more efficient energy source during intense activity. Muscle triglycerides are our fat source. Triglycerides stored within the muscles also contribute energy, but to a lesser extent than glycogen. Fat breakdown is slower and less efficient under high intensity, oxygen limited conditions. So the crossover concept of carbohydrates and fat utilization. Should be a simple chart to read. The more oxygen you use, the more carbohydrates you will use as an energy source. The less oxygen you use, the more fats you will use as an energy source. Or the less fats. What is the fat burning zone during exercise? Various fitness-related websites, as well as the consoles of many pieces of cardiovascular equipment. If you ever get on a treadmill, there's always the fat burning zone, little stickers on there. The exercise intensity needed to get into this zone is most often low intensity exercise, only 40 to 50% of maximal heart rate. The best recommendation for most people who want to achieve a healthy body weight and improve their fitness is to exercise at the highest intensity appropriate for their age, health, motivation, and current fitness level. Total caloric expenditure during exercise is the key to promote weight loss. Exercise in the fat burning zone may be very appropriate for some individuals, such as those beginning an exercise program, the elderly, and others. So here's a couple of charts to determine comparing carbohydrate and fat loss during high intensity exercise. You burn more fat in that 40 to 50% rate, but overall, you will burn more calories overall running faster and doing more intense exercise. Other factors that may influence energy sources: gender, hormones, state of training. Do you train hard or are you just a beginner? Composition of the diet, time of eating prior to competition, nutritional status, nutrient intake during exercise, environmental temperature, and drugs. Chronic fatigue syndrome, it's also known as myalgic encephalomyelitis, is a medical condition characterized by numerous symptoms: viral illnesses, sleep disturbances, immune system dysfunction, excessive mental stress, prolonged overwork. It is a complex syndrome with many factors involved. It's usually what a syndrome means. Its treatment involves behavioral therapy and graded exercise, but recovery is a long process, particularly that behavioral therapy. Somebody who wants to get over chronic fatigue syndrome has to change their behavior. And that's always the hard part. In the athlete, chronic fatigue is caused by two main things: overreaching. The condition of physical and mental stress, it may impair performance. It may be a planned phase of training in elite athletes, you're training for that stress. Or overtraining, which are prolonged periods of fatigue. And a lot of the time it's due to under recovery. A person doesn't give their muscles enough time to rest and recover, or they're not eating the correct amount or the correct nutrients to be able to recover properly. Acute fatigue may be defined as the inability to continue exercising at a desired level of intensity. That's just when we usually say fatigue, this is what we mean. The two sites of actual fatigue is in your nervous system, not your muscles. So it can be in the central nervous system, the brain and spinal cord, or in the peripheral nervous system, all the nerves that run throughout your organs. What causes acute fatigue in athletes? The interaction between the peripheral and central factors: increased formation of depressant neurotransmitters, decreased levels of energy substrates, increased levels of reactive oxygen and nitrogen species, disturbed acid-base balance, or pH is off, decreased oxygen transport. No iron means less oxygen transport in the blood. Increased core body temperature resulting in hyperthermia, disturbed electrolyte balance. And how can I delay the onset of fatigue? Proper sport training is the most effective means to delay the onset of fatigue, physiological training for each of the 3 specific energy systems. He went over that in the video. Psychological training, so the mind can tolerate stress associated with the specific event. And biomechanical training to maximize mechanical skills associated with the sport, development of muscle memory for whatever sport you're doing or playing. Nutrition is also an important to help delay fatigue during training and competition. How is nutrition related to fatiguing? A deficiency of almost every nutrient may be a contributing factor in the development of fatigue. You're low on just that one little vitamin or mineral or electrolyte or something, and it throws the whole balance off. Proper nutrition is essential to assure the athlete that an adequate supply of nutrients is available in the diet, not only to provide the necessary energy, such as through carbohydrate and fat, but to ensure optimal metabolism of the energy substrate via protein, vitamins, minerals, and water. And like I said, we will be going over every single one of those in future chapters. Carbohydrates has a whole chapter dedicated to itself, same with all of the others. See you next time.